Hi, my name is Niina and you're listening Together Through the Storms podcast. Welcome to the journey with me. I would like to begin by acknowledging traditional owners of the land where I'm recording this episode today, which is the Wurrung country. I would like to pay my respects to the elders past and present and to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may be listening today. Hi, and welcome back to Together Through the Storms podcast. My name is Niina, and I'm so grateful that you tuned in today. I will be talking to Rachel on today's episode. You may have remembered Rachel from last week's episode where she was sharing a bit more about her journey as a mum to children with additional needs and as a person diagnosed with additional needs herself. Today, our focus will be more on play therapy. So Rachel is a play therapist, and she will share some insights of what play therapy is, who benefits from play therapy, what impact can play therapists have, and so much more. You don't want to miss this episode. I learned so much about play therapy by chatting to Rachel, and I really hope you enjoy it. Hi, Rachel, and welcome back Together Through the Storms podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me on our second episode together. I am very excited to have you back. If you haven't yet listened to our last week's episode, where Rachel shares her story as a mother of two children with additional needs and also as a person diagnosed with additional needs herself, go and listen to that first. But today our perspective will be a little bit different because you have a lot to give as a professional as well. When I started this podcast, my goal was to find a play therapist because I am fascinated about what you do, but I also don't know enough. So I want to learn more, and I feel like lots of my listeners would really benefit from learning more. And today our focus is on play therapy and what it is and a little bit about your journey as a play therapist. So actually we connected by you started following me and then I started following you, and I was like, oh my goodness, you're a play therapist and your work seems incredible. I can see that you're very dedicated, you're very passionate. And I love also the fact that same way as you have that personal lived experience, which can sometimes bring so much more perspective into your work as well. So I was really excited when you said yes for my request to come to the podcast. So would you like to share a little bit about play therapy and how this landed into your life and your journey around that?
Yeah, of course. So like you said, my life redirected a little bit with my children and going through the early intervention process twice. And I guess seeing the lacking of services or how challenging it was to sort of access services. There was it still is massive wait lists, and often there is a lack of services that can be sort of supportive, I guess, for younger children in particular. And with play therapy, it's still emerging in Australia. It's still quite new over here. It's a lot more more popular over in like UK and other countries, but it's starting to get more recognised over here. So with play therapy, I think one of the biggest challenges I get, like what you said, and what I still hear quite frequently, is a lot of people and parents don't know what play therapy is, or if they've kind of heard of it, but assume that it's just playing. So with play therapy, it's actually a type of like a counselling approach that supports children, and we use the power of play and a range of therapeutic skills to support children to be able to express their emotions and work through any complicated feelings or past traumatic events that they have experienced through play. Quite often children may not be able to verbalise the complex things or past experiences, especially if it's been a traumatic experience, or if they're experiencing quite, big emotions or feelings or anxiety, things like that. They might not actually understand these feelings. Their body just feels yuck, or stressed or whatever, but they don't know how to verbalize that. They can't be expected to often sit and kind of express, oh, I'm feeling really anxious. So finding a therapy myself for my children that was going to be able to support them when they didn't understand these feelings that they were experiencing either. They were just quite overwhelmed and anxious, and they struggled with their emotional regulation, and then trying to access services and experiencing even having to say to a psychologist, my children don't need to be forced to try and make eye contact. That's not an affirming thing. That's not something that's, correct for them. So trying to find therapies that were actually suitable was really challenging, and it really did redirect my life. So I was studying teaching, and I really enjoyed learning about the developmental side of things, but I didn't want to teach, which I found out when I was doing that. And then with the children, I'm like, no, I need to get into the therapeutic side of this to support children like mine that need additional support but may not be able to engage in like a talk-based therapy. So with play therapy, how it differs to other more traditional therapies, I suppose, is it is usually predominantly child-led. There may be times that we need to have an integrative approach where we are a little bit more directive, but generally that's more in the circumstance. So if we expect a child, or we want a child to be able to express, complex feelings or processing through play, if they have some delayed play skills, or, they may not be quite where they need to be with their play, it's going to be really tricky for them to be able to do that. So at times then it may need to be directed a little bit through some modeling, or, sparking some interest, or the child may struggle to initiate play initially. They may come into the playroom and see lots of toys or things and get a bit overwhelmed by the choice. So they may need a little bit more of that integrative approach to support them to be able to engage before we can then expect them to be able to start to process anything that they need to through the play. And I guess what I personally love with play therapy, and how it does differ quite significantly from other therapies, is that we have very minimal expectations in the room and very minimal limits. So we always try and put in a redirection where possible, or, a safe alternative, rather than having to completely stop something, which can be always really interesting to see, I guess, when parents, if they do come into the room, and being on the other side as a parent as well, obviously you're worried with how your child's behaving or acting or whatever in that moment. But in play therapy, we try and hold unconditional positive regard and just allow the child to be who they are, and not have any expectations on the child to act a certain way or to do anything. So quite frequently children are very shocked, I suppose, because they're so used to always being told what to do, and often have such little autonomy and choice over their life, which is the reality of life. We have to do things, we have to go places. So to be able to come into a room, have a person that attunes to them and their needs and follows on with them. And in play therapy, we do what's called tracking, which is basically like a continued narration of the play. And from that, it really allows us to demonstrate to the child that we're really involved in what they're doing. We understand, we accept you, and it doesn't require any verbal communication at all. So children can come in and choose to talk if they want to. Children that maybe minimally speaking or not speaking, that's fine. There's no expectation for that verbal communication, and we are very much watching out for those nonverbal communication cues, and respecting the child to process what they need and do what they need in the session. So reducing those demands and providing that acceptance really helps to then build that sense of safety in the room. Another thing that's different with play therapy is the room is always consistent and it stays the same. So the child knows what to expect in the room every time they come in here. And that can be so important for children, especially if they've experienced trauma, or if they've got quite high anxiety. They know what to do when they walk in, they know where things are, and they know everything will be here. So reduce that change in that transition that can be quite challenging for so many children, the unknown, I suppose. And I guess most importantly, it's providing the children a safe space for them to be able to process and release emotions that they may have built up. And if they have experienced trauma, a complex past experience, they may not have a safe space to be able to do that. Home may not be a safe space for them, or school may not be a safe space. So providing them with an external space that they can come, it's consistent, I'm there, I'm watching them, and providing them that attunement and acceptance is just such a special experience as a play therapist to be able to do that.
Wonderful. I'm a play therapist fan now based on what you just shared. And lots of new information for me as well, but I can just recognize the need And I can imagine how many children would really benefit from opportunity to have some play therapy. So thank you for shedding some light in that. So Rachel, I have a feeling there might be a few people now thinking, who benefits from play therapy? So would you be able to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I predominantly work with neurodivergent children and their families, which, primarily is what autistic children and children with ADHD or dyspraxia, dyslexia. However, play therapy is such a broad modality that can support such a wide range of children and even older children. I know many other therapists who have got, larger space have separate rooms for older children as well. In general, it can be supportive for children who experience anxiety, things that they may be struggling with their self-confidence. It's not limited to children that actually have, condition or additional needs. It may be a sibling of a child that does have a sibling that has a disability, and, to support them with having some time to process the challenges of what they experience of that. Often there's referrals for children that have experienced the death of a loved person or parent separation, or other stressful transition in their life. It could be birth of a sibling, or moving house, and things like that can have such a significant impact on a child when their world completely changes. Things like bullying at school, or just to support some emotional regulation when they may be, really struggling with being able to regulate themselves consistently. And again, like we spoke about before, children that may be non-speaking or minimally speaking, because there is no expectation for them to come in here and talk. And I have children that may come in and speak quite a lot for the whole session, and may come in another time and not speak at all, or do a combination of all. So having that flexibility in here, and again, not having those expectations, is really, really great. Children that may have developmental delays or speech delays, we've sort of touched, I guess, on the trauma side of things. So children that have potentially experienced trauma or abuse is quite a common area where a lot of other play therapists really specialize in. I do support children that have experienced medical trauma, because there can be so many events. And I guess as well with COVID side of things, it was such a significant experience for so many that quite substantial amount of children and adults, people in general, experienced a lot of anxiety since returning from COVID. Everyone was told to isolate, and that there was this really serious infection. So it created a lot of challenges with transitioning back into school, and then also the isolation from children not experiencing those sort of typical experiences when they were quite young, going to the shops, going to a cafe. They weren't exposed to those things. So there was a lot of medical trauma side of that as well. Also sort of supporting some social awareness and understanding. A lot of the time we expect children just understand the social rules of things automatically, which is not always the way it is. So just sort of not teaching social skills, but just explaining, well, this is why we may, share, or this is why a child might get upset when we only want to play with this, and increasing that flexibility and knowledge of, well, why do they get upset? Because they may not understand. They see what, is fun for them. So not having that developed understanding can be such a common thing that a lot of children have challenges with. And, well, not lastly, but I'm sure there's a lot of other things, but a lot of people don't know that play therapists often also work with families. So the parents, and we often do some family therapy as a combination of the parents and children, siblings, or it can be just working with the parents alone, doing some psychosocial education, parenting support. So, developing the parents' understanding of child development or play development. What does it mean? What does behavior mean? Quite often we see certain behaviors and kind of just think, oh, they're being naughty, but there's generally an underlying reason for that. It's a form of communication, but the child may not have that developed ability to be able to communicate that they're actually really frustrated because they, something happened, but they just, demonstrate that in behavior because they can't verbally communicate that. So often that kind of links into sort of strengthening those family relationships and developing those understanding of what that communication actually means. So yeah, pretty broad range of things that play therapy can support.
Absolutely. And I'm sure like listeners can kind of have those aha moments and go like,
Yeah.
yeah, that would benefit or potentially suit us as well. And I feel like play in general, like from my understanding of play, is that is such a natural form for children. There's a lot of nonverbal communication that comes through play. So I can imagine that you would get so much more out of a child through play in that setup than sitting them down and expecting them to talk. So I can only imagine the power that play therapy holds.
Like we said before, often they don't understand what's upsetting them. They may not really understand things that they've experienced. The body can recall things prior to even remembering. The body holds on to this knowledge. So for them to be able to just do it naturally through the play. But I will add, obviously, play skills and supporting play skills is definitely an area as well, because it is kind of expected sometimes that children just should always know how to play. But often they do need some support with that. Maybe it might just be building some confidence and modeling some actions and then them imitating those actions and expanding their knowledge of different types of play. And quite frequently I have a lot of children that struggle with, having that limited knowledge of different types of play because that's all they know and that's what feels safe to them, which is obviously that's fine too, but kind of just having a little modeled action here and there and increasing their confidence to go, oh, actually, I can do this. This is okay. This is not going to make me look silly or stupid, or I'm not going to do this wrong. So supporting that as well can be really big thing that I do as well.
Yeah, I recognize that even just from my kids. Daycare was saying that they love chasing game and tickling games because they don't require any language, but then joining in like, what's the time, Mr. Wolf, or another type of game that is more complex is quite difficult for them. So scaffolding them to feel that they are included in those games that might require more language, more comprehension, would be so beneficial.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Rachel, I can already see how valuable your work is, and I feel that it's probably well recognized by the families and children that you work with. But would you be able to maybe reflect on what impact do you have on the children that you work with and the families?
So I guess personally having that lived experience, I feel like I really do provide that genuine empathetic understanding. Been through the overwhelming process twice of going through the early intervention and accessing NDIS and things like that, and just in general caring for children that have additional needs and everything that comes with that, the multiple appointments and navigating the therapy appointments myself and still do that. So I guess that comforts a lot of my families that I am genuine and I do understand somewhat of what they're going through, and to that I can provide and ensure that my strategies are going to be appropriate and supportive for their children. And I always say I'd never want or never do, treat families or children any different to how I would expect the same kind of level of care for my children. So that is, very important to me. But I say the biggest impact is that what the children and the families have on me, and seeing their confidence increasing and relationships developing is, the most beautifulest thing in the world. And celebrating those small wins where the child invites into the play for the first time, or they want to show you something, or they feel proud, or they may even tell you that they feel proud of themselves. Those are the biggest wins for me to see, and to be able to be a part of that is just really special. So I think I'm the lucky one being able to, to observe that.
And that probably gives you a lot of motivation to, keep on doing the precious work that you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And knowing that you can provide that sense of safety as well, because so often you may be that one secure or one of the minimal secure relationships that child may have, and having that consistent person that they can have in that time to support the family, and for the families to feel comfortable to talk to me or get support or be able to help in any way that I can is, I guess, really rewarding.
Absolutely, I can imagine. Thank you for sharing that. So, Rachel, it was so precious to hear about the most precious parts of your journey as a play therapist, but I guess as any profession comes also with some challenges. So what would you identify as the biggest challenge for you as a play therapist?
As a play therapist, I often see my families and just in general people struggling to be able to access services. So it's such a barrier, unfortunately, whether that's having limited financial means to be able to access play therapy or trying to access NDIS funding. Currently, the delays have been quite extreme. I have never seen them this challenging before. So extensive delays or, having limited funding. So, trying to work out, well, which therapy do I have to prioritize at the moment to be able to support my child, because I can't afford to have two therapists at once. It makes it hard as obviously the therapist and being on the other side as the parent too. You want to be able to provide your child as much access to the services as you can, but then also the juggle of many appointments, but then the financial cost of being able to either afford them or to access the funding can be a massive barrier and challenge, which is really frustrating to see that so many people come against that. So we're still classed as alternative therapy in Australia rather than allied health. But we're trying to push for change for that so we can be recognised and be able to provide more families for support, younger children in particular, or children that may not be able to engage in talk-based therapy often do respond better to therapy like play therapy, where there's the limited expectation on that verbal side of things. So hopefully things can change and we can get access to that in the future.
Absolutely. I really hope that too. And, that's probably one of our goals with our work together as well, to spread that awareness and to kind of get people to recognize the need for that and the potential that it holds. So hopefully there's more possibilities in the future. Rachel, there might be now lots of listeners either who were thinking about prior this episode that they would want to engage with a play therapist, or if they didn't before, I'm sure at this point they are dying to engage with a play therapist after hearing everything that you've shared with us today. Would you have any advice or words of wisdom to a family that are considering this?
Yes, definitely. So like I sort of mentioned before, unfortunately, play therapy does not have a title protection yet in Australia, so it is unregulated. So the important thing is really assessing what qualifications your therapist does have. Most of us do recommend a postgraduate qualification in play therapy. So for example, Masters in Play Therapy. Play-based therapy is quite different to actual play therapy. It's not the same. In the Masters, we did 3 years of training, which includes, supervision and many hours of placement. So it is important to ensure if you are actually after play therapy that you are getting qualified play therapist. And it's mostly important as well just to talk to the therapist to ensure that they are the right fit for your child. And getting word of mouth from other families as well is always good, just, to get that feedback. But the biggest thing, everyone's individual circumstances are always going to be different. So no therapist is ever going to be suitable for every single child or family. And so feeling comfortable is such an important part. We work so closely with the parents or caregivers as well. So we want you to be able to feel safe to us, to be able to, collaborate successfully and to know what's happening for you. The more that we know that's happening for the family, the better that we can support you. So having that close communication is really important, and being able to feel comfortable to actually speak freely with the therapist. So I'm trying to find the right therapist that is actually suitable is really important. And just ensuring that the qualifications, they are actually the type of play therapist that you are looking for to engage for your child, because it can be different depending on the qualifications of that individual therapist.
That's such a valuable advice. Good thing to keep in mind when researching and looking into options.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for joining me today and sharing so valuable information about play therapy. I have learned so much new, and I'm sure that our listeners have too. So I really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been really nice to chat, and I'm always happy to advocate for our children or for play therapy. So it's quite important to me.
Yes, I can tell that it's a true passion professionally and personally, and I just find people like you very inspiring. And that was kind of the core reason why I wanted to do this podcast, to share that awareness and, people to find resources and strategies that will support them on this very challenging journey. So this has definitely been an eye-opening experience. And do you want to share and give your business a little shout out?
Sure. So I'm Blossoming Minds Play Therapy. I'm located in Teesdale, which is just outside of Geelong. You can find me on all the social media or the website as well. Happy to have a chat if anyone's got any questions about anything. If I can provide any support or guidance, feel free to get in touch.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that opportunity. And I will put all the details into the episode description so you can find the links there and go and find Rachel and share her on the socials and get some practical ideas through that way as well. I appreciate your time with us, and I hope all the best for you as a mum and as a play therapist.
Thanks so much. And parents, just remember to trust your gut. And if you ever have concerns about your child's development or advocating, just you know your child better than anyone. So just remember that and trust your gut. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Rachel. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode with Rachel. I really hope that you learned something new about play therapy. If you want to engage with Rachel, you can find her details linked into this episode description. If you know someone who would really love hearing this episode, as always, feel free to share this on your social media. I would love if you could give me a follow on Spotify. That would mean so much for me. And if you have any questions or any feedback, please contact me on Together Through the Storm's Instagram account. I will be back next week. I look forward to see you then. Have a great week, everybody.